One thing that we see a lot of, and it's so prevalent, it's everywhere.
Painting it or replacing it can make such a difference.
We have 2 appraisals in hand. We have 3 home inspectors that have been out there. I've seen it. I have pictures. Right. He said, needs a roof. We are not doing it.
My name is Kevin McIntosh, and this is The Closing Table, where we talk to experts about their experience in real estate all across the country. Let's go. Welcome back to The Closing Table. I am your host, Kevin C. McIntosh, and joining us on this very special in-studio episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Nick Casteel. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Kevin?
Great. Thank you so much for being here, sir, taking time out of your very busy schedule and accepting our invitation to be on The Closing Table. We appreciate that.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Always like to acknowledge that. So we are here to talk about real estate, more specifically in your market, to see what's going on. You are the expert there. But before we do that, I always like to take time to get to know our guests and let our audience know our guests. So, Nick, if you can, tell us in 60 seconds who you are outside of real estate.
Oh, outside of real estate, I'm a lot more fun. I'm a father, very blessed father, 2 young kids, 1 3, 1 1. So I got a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. And I have a beautiful wife, and, we just enjoy raising them. Mm-hmm. And I like to sail as a hobby. That's a lot of fun. And, I just like hanging out, family, friends. I'd rather be outside than inside.
Oh, yeah.
That's my story.
Yeah. And I can imagine you staying busy. When you mentioned having a 1-year-old and 3-year-old, I have a 1-year-old. He'll be 2 in another month. And I completely get it. Keeps you on your toes. So, yeah. Congratulations, by the way, on that, by the way. Okay, cool. Good to hear about you being an active father and still being a businessman. So let's get into the business part of it. I want you kind of like describe your real estate business if you can. And hit some of the key points if you can. How long you've been licensed, what your niche or specialty is if you have one, sure. Or even some of your notable achievements.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been doing real estate now for 13 years.
Nice.
So yeah, I started before I was in real estate. Mm-hmm. I actually was selling mortgages for what used to be Shore Mortgage.
Okay, I've heard of them.
Yeah. Well, United Wholesale, UWM, kind of was a spin-off of there.
Correct. Yeah.
And I was on the other side of the street from where their offices were down on Adams in Birmingham back in the day. And that didn't work out. I fell into real estate as I was finishing grad school. So I have an MBA in finance. So I was like, all right, doing this. And then I said, all right, let me finish up grad school. And then kind of just fell into working for one of the agents that I had built a relationship when I was selling loans.
Gotcha.
And fell into real estate at absolutely the worst time. So the world was crumbling around.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I remember being at Shore Mortgage, and I was at one office, and that office closed. They shipped half of us got fired, half of us went to another office, and then the whole world started imploding like that. Mm-hmm. That's when I got into real estate. It was wonderful. But those first several years, we were just killing the foreclosures, mm-hmm. killing the short sales. Mm-hmm. And we just that was the niche, was, just all these distressed sales that were just all over the whole market. And you might sell a property 4 or 5 times. It was a totally different market than we're in here. There'd be properties that had no problems. They were just nice properties, but people didn't want them. And, price was important, and people could be picky then. Yeah. That was a buyer's market. Mm-hmm. And it's been a long time since we've seen it.
I know, right? That.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been doing real estate now 13 years. So I've been licensed. I got my broker's license. I started up a small real estate group, if you will, with underneath that license. And that's the Find New Keys group. So everywhere online, we're at Find New Keys. So hopefully easy to find. We've been working on putting out a lot of social content. So we've been really, really kind of trying to get out there and create a brand online that people can kind of relate to. So there's 4 licensed agents underneath the group. And we have an admin that does a lot of like the back end paperwork and stuff that I don't love to do on a daily basis, but still do it. I mean, you have to. It's part of the nature of the beast. But we Geographically, our Metro Detroit is what we say, like as a broad term, but realistically, we're on the north side of Metro Detroit. We really don't. I think I sold one property last year south of Detroit, so most of it is Macomb, Oakland, and we do a little bit of the Grosse Points and whatnot. Maybe one or two sales in Detroit. So Macomb, Oakland, Wayne is what we tell people, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a neighborhood. It's a bunch of different neighborhoods that all have their own characteristics and all of that. And it's all what I tell everyone we can drive.
There you go.
So on a regular basis. Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. And we like to concentrate on people that have a need for the real estate, the people that have to sell and such. So, the thing that we're seeing a lot of right now, and because this market with these higher interest rates, not everyone's moving. And the question on everyone's hand is, well, what do I do on the flip side? Right. So if I sell my home, what do I do with it? Because now I have to go and buy something. And, roughly 35 to 40% of homes in America don't even have a mortgage. So for them, the interest rate isn't necessarily the killer, right?
Correct.
So we look at that and we say, well, how many millennials are coming out and actually need a home? They don't have one at all. How many people are downsizing and need a home? How many people are having kids? I mean, you and I, new fathers, and we have a kid that's 1 year old. Well, I have another family right now that just had moved from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, and they were looking for exclusively. They had the third kid, and it wasn't the most opportune time to move. But they needed space. They needed a spot to put a bed and a crib, and all the things that come along with the extra, kid.
Correct.
And so those need to moves. I have a divorce situation going on right now. Those people, they have to move. There's no like, well, maybe we'll take care of it. And that's where we specialize in, because usually those transactions are a little bit more complicated. Usually they are time sensitive, where somebody has to do something in a certain timeline. And if they don't, then it's going to be really costly for them. And we don't want to make anybody homeless. We want to make sure that we help people get their ducks in a row.
Correct.
So that when they go to do this, they never have to worry about that.
Correct.
Yeah.
I love that perspective too, because it's very important for people to be knowledgeable about what's going on. The market has shifted just from the beginning of this year. Like, it's still a seller's market, don't get me wrong, but the leverage is kind of changing a little bit. The negotiations at the table is changing. The buyer demand is changing. So there's a lot of things that's changing. So it's important to make sure you get with someone who is a professional, who knows the market, such as yourself. You even spoke on interest rates, which is a huge influence on decision making when it comes to buying. And that can have a huge fluctuation on how much you're paying. So we talked about this before the show, but you said you have some tips to help people save a lot of money, especially during this type of time. So we will get to that. I want you to stick around, because I will have Nick actually explain that. So I'm glad you brought up the interest rates in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Good reminder. I got that on my notes for the very end.
Yes.
And sometimes the littlest things can save people the most amount of money.
Yes, sir.
It's getting, again, with your professional, getting those ducks in a row, and it's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is most people's biggest purchase, of their life.
Of course, hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000 in most cases. So yes, it's definitely important to make sure all your ducks are in a row, T's are crossed, I's are dotted. Yeah, definitely. Nick, I want to ask you about an experience throughout your career, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you've been to many different properties, many different types.
Oh my God.
So have you been to a property where you were kind of dealing with an unconventional feature or layout that maybe people didn't necessarily see as attractive, but you put a nice perspective and spin on it to make people see it as what it is, the value?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we see this all the time in real estate. So I go in, probably, I don't even know how many. I've never added up how many homes in a year, maybe thousands of homes a year. Yeah. When by the time you add up how many places you pre-walk for your buyers and stuff, and at the end of the day, you see things that other people might not see converted in different ways. So when you're in a house and they have a room that might be awkward, or they may have a little setup that might be awkward, you can then have that perspective because you've seen it so many times over and over. Okay. And you might say, oh, I've seen this happen before. This is something you could potentially do with it. I like to use a general analogy when I'm out showing houses, and I tell people when there is space, you can do a lot with it.
Correct.
When it's a small little room, you can't necessarily do with it. You know, sometimes you get this wasted space, and I actually will discount that. I'll say, look, you got 20% of this house's wasted space. I know it's 1,200 square feet, but we have to discount that off of what we're really valuing this house. I've got to value this more like a 1,000 square footer. So in that way, I can tell them, look, this space won't have value to other people. And so if you're going to go to sell it at any point in the future, let's look back on that. The other flip side could be the same too. Maybe this space is not used by the particular seller, but it could be used by a buyer. Well, then if we're selling the house, we want it staged appropriately.
Correct.
So it's either, and of course you're familiar with window sill and everything, it's either that we want to digitally stage it or we want to actually stage it because we want to be able to put in somebody's mind that we can actually use this space for X, Y, or Z, even if somebody isn't doing it. And sometimes that'll be a matter of completely flipping how they have furniture in it, whatnot. A particular example that I remember is we walked into this place and it had a really nice porch feature, but the porch was like partially open to the actual living space of the house. Okay. Now, the way that this particular house was designed, it kind of looked like a pseudo porch, and it was like not very efficient for the heat and everything. Well, you know, for under $1,000, we got my buyer had a new heating and cooling system run to that line, so they tapped into the house lines and stuff, and then they had that doorway opened up a little bit, and then when they went to reappraise the home 6 months from there, they just added somewhere around 300 square feet. So now, just by spending $1,000 on some heating and cooling, maybe another $1,000 in carpentry, they literally increased the size of that house by 10%. And when you increase, and this was livable space, usable space. Correct, right. And big difference. So big difference if and when they ever go to sell. And it was a big difference when they had it reappraised. So now they had the equity in the home. Yes. And they didn't. Love that. And so then, you know, a lot of times people right now, and I don't know if there's actually a survey done that most people do not realize that you can buy a home with standard conventional mortgage for 5% down. You don't need the 20% savings that everyone thinks you do. So there's a lot of buyers in that situation. So in this particular situation, and you know from being in the industry, if you do put less than 20% down, you get hit with mortgage insurance. Mortgage insurance, for those who don't know, is like I call it the crappiest insurance ever, because you're paying somebody else's insurance. I mean, correct. Yeah. It's absolutely horrible. You're paying insurance in case you default. Yep. So you're paying somebody else's insurance on you. It's just,
it is kind of wild.
Yeah. It's the crappiest thing ever. So anyway, but because there are a bunch of people who don't realize that if you are in that boat where you can get something, let's say for 5% down, and then you add that kind of square footage, you've just built in the equity that you needed to get rid of that extra payment then and there. And you made your house more livable, or maybe a space, you know, better suited for your family, all for like a small change. Now, every house can't have that, but that's a good example of something that we've seen that it's like, oh, look at that. You just added all this by doing because you had open mind, and, you know, so small things make a big difference.
No, that's 100%. The fact that you even had that vision to see it, that's a big thing, because that's what staging is for, is also, right? Yeah, people don't necessarily have the vision for what to do with a small space, a certain closet, a room, or whatever the case may be. But if you put different furniture in there, different items in there, actually make that space a livable space, or make it a space where they can utilize it for multi-functions, a studio, a workout area, or whatever the case may be. You know, that's where you use your previous experience and any other, you know, relative experience, for, to actually make that come to life. So that's beautiful. I like that you were able to expand that home in that livable area only for $1,000.
Oh yeah, it was maybe another $1,000 for carpentry, like I said. So a couple thousand added 300 square feet. I mean, average price per square foot, depending on where we are in Metro Detroit, it's $200 a square foot almost on average now. That's a $60,000, extra equity right there. Even if you don't get all of that from an appraiser, you're getting a lot of that. So it can make a big difference. And it's funny that you mentioned, the closet spaces and the things of that nature. Staging and properly cleaning your home is like the most bang for your buck you can get.
Talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, when you are getting your home ready for sale, cleaning, staging, getting it ready so that people walk in and they see a clean slate and they see something they can put themselves into, by far the best return on any investment you can ever make. Once you own a home, the best investment, if you're only going to spend $1,000 or $2,000, is probably on storage. You mentioned closets, things of that nature. Okay. Yeah, I think so. You can get so much more oomph out of like a closet or out of something like a little storage room if you have shelves and built-in like areas and stuff. The best money around in most of Metro Detroit is finishing a basement. Yes, we only pay taxes. Yes, we only pay taxes really on the building itself.
Correct,
and that's just the way it is around here. Most of us have a basement area that could be livable square footage, and typically your taxes, I mean, some cities will, but most cities won't reassess it because of that. And so you're paying taxes, basically little taxes on a lot more square footage. And you also don't need to run new foundation. You also don't need to run any new plumbing, electrical. You might need to tap off of what you're doing, but you don't need whole systems. So it's the best bang for your buck locally.
Let me tell you something, Nick. My perspective on basements have kind of changed over a while. I've been hearing so many different stories. See, and I'm a big fan of basements. Growing up, my mom had a finished basement. We had a kitchen down there, a whole shower. So I love basements. Always want a home with a finished basement. But then you hear the stories of the flooding.
Yep.
Especially in Metro Detroit. I mean, if we're being honest, when it rains, sometimes the flooding can be bad. Sure. And the basement is the first place to get hit. So it's not that I don't like basements anymore. It's that I have to change my perspective and know that this can be vulnerable to leaks. It can be vulnerable to floods and things of that nature, but you have to do your due diligence.
100%.
That comes with meeting with a professional like yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Due diligence is essential. And basements, if you are going to finish the basement, a couple things. Number one, there's different sump pump backup systems that you can have installed. The biggest thing that we see is water penetration. You had mentioned water, and we want to do the best to keep the water away from the house. So proper gutter systems, proper landscaping around the house to keep that water away. Correct. That'll solve 90% of your issues. And then if you need a sump pump system put it in before you're going to do any kind of finishing. And take it with a grain of salt. If you go into a house that already has a wet basement, you don't know how long that's going to take, it's like a guess and check method to get it fixed, right? First we fix this, then we fix this, then we fix this. Quite frankly, unless you have the ability to take on that risk, don't. There's plenty of dry basements around and don't. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah. Thank you for that, Nick. Yeah, and that great perspective on the basement too, the sump pump and things of that nature. Yeah. Some things that you don't think about until you actually talk to a professional. So
I just told somebody I got a house under contract 2 days ago. We just did the inspection yesterday. It passed. And they said, well, I'm thinking about finishing the basement. And I said, good news. The water line to run a water backup to the sump pump's right there. It's a 10-foot line. Okay. That's all you have to have. It's already the new piping, so it's PEX piping. You just tap into it, really cheap. It'll be nothing to have this installed, and then you really protect your asset. Do that first.
Yes.
Then get into all the other ins and outs.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you for that, Nick. Great tips, by the way. Make sure you're taking notes. Curb appeal. We just focused on a little bit of the interior and things of that nature. Let's get into a curb appeal, because simple changes like improving curb appeal can have a significant impact on the sale of a home. Also, it's the first thing people see when they pull up to a home. So can you talk about any examples of small cost-effective improvements that you've seen make a big difference, maximizing offers for sellers on Curb Appeal?
For sure, yeah. Actually, it's not only the first thing people see when they pull up, but nowadays the first thing that most people see, because most people are finding properties online, which is why we're spending so much money on marketing online. Yeah. Every single month, we're probably spending $4,000 to $5,000 on online marketing to our database and such. And excuse me, the reason is because that's what people see first right now. There are the occasional houses where people drive by and see it, and but really think about what will stand out in photos as well, right? Or video, because video is becoming more and more prevalent. We're using it more and more in our marketing. We're doing one right now, as part of the podcast. But it's extremely important to see things that are just like on the inside. The same rules apply. So the best bang for your buck is going to be cleaning, grooming, getting that place looking good from a perspective of what you see, right?
Correct.
And that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck that you'll ever spend money on. So get a landscaper over there, trim the bushes, pull some of the overgrown things out of the way, spend some time just making sure that it looks tidy. That's going to be best bang for your buck.
Right.
And then after that, every year, all kinds of different realtor associations, all kinds of different marketing associations always put out studies, and they put out studies about what the best return on investment you could do if you were going to do an improvement on your home. And year in, year out, the top return on investments, the only ones that actually typically are above 100%, meaning if you spend $1,000 on this, you're going to get maybe $1,200 in return on that investment, right? So it's positive.
Right.
You're not going to lose that money. Are exactly what you just said, Curb Appeal, right? Now, first thing is obviously a bright flower. If you're going to list your house, a couple bright flower pots in the front, but I'm talking about like an actual investment in your home. Year in, year out, new front door.
I was just going to say that. If you didn't mention it, I was going to be like, I heard the front door.
Front door.
Of all places.
Yep. But if you can't afford a new front door because maybe you just have, you can paint an older front door, scrape and paint for a gallon of paint, which you can get at the local hardware store, and an hour of your time, you can put a real facelift on the front of the home. There's all kinds of articles written about how the rest of your house, which front door color would be suitable for what house you have, right? So I've seen bright green doors, bright red doors, and it's just incredible. And then people notice that. They're like, oh, I want to go see the home with the red door. And you wouldn't believe how many times I get called and say, hey, did you see that listing come up in Birmingham or wherever the listing is with that bright green door, that bright blue door? That's the one I want to check out. I do not recommend that for painting throughout your house, but it has to properly go with
Correct.
And again,
right.
And the other thing that goes with new front door is a new garage door. So you got to realize, let's think about this. The front door, sometimes that can be $1,000, $2,000. A lot of times you can do the garage door for the same amount of money, and it's a bigger door.
Correct.
And it's a bigger eyesore. So again, return on investment is typically over 100% for a new garage door. And we have a lot of houses. I live in one that has the garage turned to the side, but a lot of houses in and around this area have the garage door that is facing the front.
Correct.
So you actually, from your eyesight, that will catch an eye first. And we have a lot of older homes built in the 50s and 60s. They got that old garage door on them. You can call up Lowe's, have them install a new 2-car garage door for like $2,100 right now.
Wow.
And you'll get that money back immediately. Correct. In what the studies show in sales price if you're thinking about selling. And here's the great part. Not only that, but it will look so much better it will appeal to more people that have seen it. Because before people get into your house, they're already judging it.
Yes.
They're already making a list in their head. What do I have to change?
Yeah. Good points, man. I love that. Doors. Who would have known? Doors open doors to more opportunity.
Doors.
Literally. Doors open the doors to more opportunity.
Doors.
So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I heard that, or I saw that when I was doing some research a while ago.
Yeah.
Front doors, just repainting it or replacing it can make such a difference in how your listing stands out, how people just perceive it, and then the garage door also.
Yep.
You know, that a lot of people want garages, especially in the winter in Michigan. You want a garage. So the garage door getting in, and now it's being used so much, it can have wear and tear. It can go through the natural elements of rain, water, and, you know, just the paint chipping. So replacing that, I can absolutely see, especially if it's facing the street and it's like the face of the garage, the face of the house.
Yeah, sometimes that's the face of the house.
Correct.
It's crazy.
Man, that was very knowledgeable. Thank you for sharing that with us, Nick. We appreciate that. So I want to talk about ironing out any situation in a transaction, more specifically inspections. Inspections are usually where the problems arrive if you're going to have a problem.
For sure.
So can you talk about an unforeseen issue during a home inspection that you didn't know at first, but when it came up, you found a way to actually manage to get through it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the biggest thing that pops up during home inspections is what cannot be seen with the naked eye. You know, when we're walking through houses and we are walking through them with a buyer, or we're walking through them before we list it with the seller, we can see everything on the surface. And when you see so many houses and you've been through so many inspections, it's not like you know everything,
Correct.
but you've seen enough to kind of get a gist of what's going on, right? And but you cannot see what's behind the walls. You cannot see, you know, you have so many basements that are finished, but like, you know, behind the walls, what's going on with the foundation. Sometimes it's easier to buy a house without a finished basement that you don't have. So then you can have a clear.
Correct.
I've had clients that say, look, I want an unfinished basement because I want to see that those foundations are solid. The bricks are straight, the bricks are square, everything else. But to get back to your question, so the one thing that we see a lot of, and it's so prevalent, it's everywhere, and it is mold. And it's usually in the attic space or in the basement, again, usually where we cannot see it.
Correct.
So the seller doesn't know it's there. They've never been in their attic. You ask the seller, have you ever been in your attic? Never once have I been in my attic. They just don't go. They have no reason to go in their attic.
That is crazy to me, yeah.
They hired a guy to put in insulation 10 years ago.
And that was it.
That was it, you know, and maybe their wife stored some stuff up there because everyone's got too much stuff, right? But yeah, so that was it. And then it's really a matter of, okay, how do we address this? And usually we see the same problems kind of over and over again, right? Over insulating to the point that you do not have correct airflow within the house itself, which causes problems. The vents, we see a lot of vents for bathrooms that the vent just got detached. It got pulled down by something. So that's the biggest thing we see that we didn't know about ahead of time and that we have to address. And believe it or not, there's a lot of local companies, and that's where, you know, a little bit of experience comes in handy, where, you know, if you're partnered with the right person, they know what companies to call, what those companies actually need to address to be able to remediate the problem and go forward, so that both people can feel comfortable with the situation and move on, you know, hand in hand without having to worry anymore. And usually these things can be done at a fraction of what people are scared that it'll cost, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to ask, you have to see, reach out to people for different resources.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll get the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I've heard that story from a close friend of mine, finding out that a leak that started from the roof came down and was in between the walls. And it was like in between the kitchen and the bathroom. So he had to basically demolish both the bathroom and the kitchen to get through. He told me about this months ago. He's still fixing it today. Yeah. Contractors who weren't reliable and all of that. So it's so unfortunate. Yeah. It's so unfortunate, but that's another thing and doing your due diligence. Like you said, sometimes you just don't know. You just don't see it. It's in between walls. How often are you just cracking in between your walls just to see if there's mold? Well,
that's where another part of the story comes in, and that is making sure that you get the proper insurance. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yes, there are things that you can't see, and we can only see so much at an inspection or so much when, you know, we're at the property. And even an inspector, all inspectors have like this carte blanche, like legal document that somebody filled out that said, we are not responsible for, you know, like it's basically like the pharmaceutical ads.
The long disclaimer afterwards.
Like the long disclaimer or whatever. But the long and the short of it is due diligence can only take you so far.
Correct.
You know,
I'm glad you said that.
So what you really want to do is you want to make sure that you are insured properly so that these things do not happen and cause you to be in a financial bind where you can't take care of it. So we all have homeowners insurance, but the homeowners insurance might not cover if our basement gets wet or if the water leak was from the wrong source or whatever. And it's important to just make sure that whoever you partner with for that is giving you proper coverage. So I see all the time now, you know, people are like, oh, I shopped around online and I got this thing for like, you know, $20 cheaper. I would implore people not to do that. Instead, I would say, you know what, get with somebody who can tell you what coverage you need for what house you have. So if you say, hey, I got this gorgeous kitchen and I got the matching cupboards throughout the house, then I'd say, well, make sure your insurance person knows that, because if you don't have the proper coverage, they will just replace one line of those cupboards, and now you have 2 or 3 different sets of cupboards throughout the house, because that's the way that insurance policies are typically written. So cover yourself by talking to another expert. Homes are a big investment. We talked about it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, you know, spend the extra maybe $100 a year, get the proper insurance on it. And then if you do have, God forbid, an issue where it's leaking between the walls and you got to tear apart 2 rooms, you know, you can put that in somebody else's pocketbook and actually survive, because that's what insurance is for. It's for a rainy day, right?
Literally, right? Good one right there. Okay. But that speaks again into, I'm so happy that you spoke on the fact that even due diligence, I mean, you do what you can, but then sometimes curveball happens. That's life, you know? So then you take that extra coverage by getting insurance, and not just any insurance, the proper insurance for your property, for your market, for the area that you're living in, that type of thing. Very, very important. Yeah. Glad you mentioned that also. A few other things that could bring up a hiccup in the transaction: legal issues, zoning issues, restrictions. Sure. Have you been in a situation where you've gotten through a transaction and you had a point where you had those issues?
Yeah. I mean, these are the ones nobody wants to talk about, right?
Yep.
But there are legal issues that pop up, and sometimes they're unforeseen. And again, we're only allowed to do so much as agents. Not all agents are lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, and that's where I kick back and I say, okay, who can I talk to in regards to this to make sure that I'm giving the right advice? And I many times rely on that just as a backstop to make sure I'm not giving or overstepping, you know, my bounds or anything else as a realtor. The broker that I broker under is Brookstone Realtors, and the CEO of Brookstone is an attorney himself, and we talk, you know, probably about once a month, make sure that everything is in line with what we're doing, to make sure that that's okay. I pay for a legal service to make sure that I can call up, and I call up anytime there's even a question legal wise and get their opinion to make sure that I'm not. If you're not kind of covering those bases, you can be up the creek without a paddle. And even then there's things that happen that, okay, goodness gracious. And you know what? That's when I, refer out to the legal partner and say, okay, I can't unfortunately do this. This is where the law comes in and the legal people have to come in. And of course, the old saying is that no matter what, if you go to court, the judge is going to make sure that nobody leaves happy. Oh, God. That's a fact. And, and so you never want to be in that situation. You always want to try to cover your basis and everything ahead of time. But we've had all kinds of things come up from people not leaving the property that they were supposed to when they leave a house. Maybe they took items that they weren't supposed to take out of it, or they leave items they were supposed to leave in, or they leave items that they weren't supposed to, and then that becomes an issue, right? There's been damaged property post sale. And there's been people that have like left sales in mid-contract, and then there's the argument of, did they have the right to leave the sale mid-contract? And maybe work was done on it, and then there's that back and forth that can happen. And the best advice that I give to all those people is, look, this is the point where you talk to an attorney and try to get, again, make sure your ducks are in a row so that you're protected when the shit hits the fan type deal, right? You know, make sure you're covered. And it can be an uphill battle for some of that. But I personally have went to court several times for clients, and I'll testify and I'll give my, honest opinion. You do enough transactions, it's a numbers game, so it's going to happen, unfortunately.
Very unfortunate, but it's important, like you said, to have an attorney on your team, someone who's within your circle that you can contact if you are facing a situation like that, because like you said, if you do it long enough, it's bound to happen. Yep. It's bound to happen. And speaking of doing it long enough, over 1,000 transactions, this man has been involved in. Congratulations, first and foremost. I feel like that's an important milestone. But can you recall any transaction out of that 1,000 plus that maybe stood out to you, had an unusual twist or turn at any stage of it? Anything you can share with us in that regard and how you got through it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'll give this example. We sold this one house 2 times, and so we sold it, and we had it under contract to sell. I was on the listing side of it. And the buyer backed out last minute for no reason at all. At 2 days before closing, they literally said, "We'll give up our earnest money." And so the seller decided, you know what? I still have a house to sell. I'll release them because I want to sell the property. Right? Sold it again. Okay. And sure enough, the day of closing, they decided to the next buyer decided to cancel again. No reason. They gave up the earnest money, but we really didn't have much recourse beyond that. Sold it a third time.
Stop it.
Yeah. Sold it a third time.
Don't tell me.
Listen to this. The third time we sold it, this house had already passed 2 inspections,
right,
2 appraisals. Everything was golden. And they said, the inspection passed. Perfect. Moving forward. The appraiser came out there and he said, needs a roof. And I said, I think you're thinking of the wrong house. And he said, no, it needs a roof. We're not moving forward with this without a roof. And I said, we have 2 appraisals in hand. I can send them to you. We have 3 home inspectors that have been out there. I've seen it. I have pictures. He said, needs a roof, or we are not doing it. No, unbelievable. The particular seller in this case had moved out of the house, so I went over there with them. This particular case is my brother, actually. So it couldn't have happened to a closer person, a worse scenario, because, of course, when the shit hits the fan, it's got to be your,
somebody you have to deal with on a regular,
So I go over there with him, and I'm like, we went there, and the whole back of the roof had literally almost peeled off. They must have had some kind of storm or something else that went through there and peeled off and I said, I can't deny this guy who went to the house was right. It does need a roof now. Yeah. And so it happened, and we're like, okay. So, we put a roof on it, and then we worried about insurance after the fact. And we said, look, here's a photo from 3 days ago.
Right.
It didn't need this. Obviously, this was.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. No, it needs a roof. And no, it does not. But in that case, we double checked and everything else. And it ended up being something, if you do the documentation right now, you have documentation. It was a good roof. 3 days ago, it was a good roof, whatever. So obviously this is storm damage. Right. So you can get whatever. But sometimes you have to bite the bullet.
Man.
Hey, need this to happen.
I couldn't imagine that. So it was perfectly fine. Even though the buyers backed out prior to it, it wasn't the roof then.
No, it wasn't the roof then.
But then a storm happened, and
keep in mind that third sale, they had already done inspection. They'd already put the contract together. Everyone had walked by and seen it. Yeah. Crazy.
And the fact that the appraiser saw it rather than the inspector.
Yeah, because he came out second.
Oh man, okay, yeah, 1,000 transactions. You're gonna see it all. You're gonna see it be involved with it all, man. Man, crazy. Nick, yeah, I get it. Well, but lo and behold, even when you face a situation like that, you still have to come up with solutions. You got to come up with solutions. A solution might be, let's put a roof on right now. Let's worry about insurance later. Yep. Let's get this taken care of. Because if you want to close on this house, okay, if this sale isn't going to go forward, guess what? The next guy's going to walk up. This is clear as day. This isn't like he's wrong. Yeah. It needs a roof now. It didn't a month ago. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Crazy. Yeah. No damage inside or anything like that. So okay. That's fortunate. Yeah. Crazy. Okay. Wow. All right. But only a professional can actually, stay cool, keep a level head, and actually get it resolved. So good job right there, Nick. I want to ask you, this is what I would consider my $1 million question for our audience, right? Inquiring minds want to know, if you are a first-time home buyer in today's market, with the resources that are available and the knowledge that you personally know, what approach would you take to earning your first home? Yeah. So I would take a couple of steps. Number one, the very first thing I'd do is I would start talking to some professionals. So I would talk to a real estate professional and I would talk to a mortgage professional. Really good idea to get an idea where you are financially and what you can afford, so that you're not looking in Birmingham and you can afford Madison Heights. Okay. So that way you have an idea, and don't go with what we hear this story all the time from first-time home buyers. Don't go with what a mortgage company says you can afford. Oh yeah. Right? Oh, yeah. Go with what you can afford. So sit down on paper. If you're married, you and your wife sit down and talk about what you feel comfortable with for a monthly payment. Right? And say, okay, if we can, if we're good, because everyone's going to be in a different situation. I've had so many people ask me, well, what do you pay? What is and it's like, well, it's not what I pay. It's not it's what you feel comfortable with, because everyone has different needs, different wants, different income levels. They have a different goal for the house. Then once you figure that out, figure out how long you want to be in your home, because that's really important. So is this going to be a stopgap? I'm only staying here for a year or two. What am I doing with it afterwards? Am I selling it or am I renting it? And have these things kind of in mind so that you can buy the right house based on what you're looking for. Correct. Don't just go into it and say, I need a house. Because if you go into it with a little bit of a plan, you can really set yourself up for success. And then I would buy, probably based on any situation right now, I would buy with probably the least amount down that I can when it's your primary residence, because it's one of the few times in life when you're actually going to be able to do that. You can always put the extra cash in later, but with first-time home buyers, we see it all the time. They want to change something in the house. Something comes up and they have to, and they don't have, a lot of first-time home buyers, they don't have that extra stash of like savings or anything else. So I'd rather have that money in your pocket, quite honestly. And put low money down and go and buy that house, and buy something that you can afford now. Okay. You might want to stretch it to what you can afford. You might be making more money in the future or whatever else, but make sure it's within that budget, because if you can't afford that house, this is going to be a long-term payment that's going to affect your credit forever, and that'll set yourself up for failure for a long time to come. So get in something that you can afford properly. Yeah, talk about it. Yeah, because you don't want. I've heard this term so many times. You don't want to be house poor. Boom. Maximizing what they say what you are approved for, and going that entire route, or asking someone else what they currently pay. It has nothing to do with you or your situation. It's case by case, your income and what you can manage. So absolutely. And like you said, you don't want to be house poor. You want to make sure that's the other thing. Just real quick, you said something and it triggered something in my mind. I see a lot of first-time home buyers not take account for the basics that are in a house. Look, the roof's got to have got to be able to block the rain. Right, it's got to block water from coming into it. Your appliances that are in the house, your mechanicals, the windows got to open. The furnace has to run. The air conditioner, if you have that, or if you have a wife, you're going to need one for sure. but like those kind of things, they're very costly when they come up. So
So, if you were an investor, it'd be CapEx expenses or whatever. You want to see if a house has good bones, foundationally. You don't want it to be crumbling or anything else. But if these big expenses are coming up, either know and plan for them or buy one that already has it in it. Because you can finance this stuff at 90. A lot of these people are putting 1% down, sometimes 3% down, sometimes 0% down if they're veterans or they're buying in a rural community.
Correct.
And if they have a little bit of cash on the side, they can afford to finance a house that already has those mechanicals updated, and then you can make the inside as pretty as you want.
That is a good point.
Paint it any color.
That is a good point. Yeah,
concentrate on those.
You would hate to get into a home and then find out you have to replace a stove or a refrigerator or something like that. Or a sewer line.
Look, we gotta have these things. You gotta have a sewer line. You gotta have good water in the house. You gotta have a dry home. These kind of things, they're not changing. Gotta have windows that don't leak.
Correct.
Those kind of things you need regardless of what colors and style.
Oh yeah.
You can always replace a kitchen cabinet or paint a wall, but if my roof is leaking, causing everything else to be damaged, that's important.
Yeah. Same thing. Like comparing it to like a vehicle or a car. As long as the engine runs good and you can drive the car, you work on the cosmetics and things later as you can, as you can over time. But focus on the actual functionality of what you're purchasing. Yeah. Is what I would say. So
absolutely.
Great words. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for pulling up to the closing table in person. A very special episode. At this point, if you have any last words and or want to tell people how to reach out to you, please do so now.
Yeah, absolutely. My phone number is 248-773-3314. And you can call or text that number. You can also find us all places online at Find New Keys. So Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and website, findnewkeys.com. So everything at Find New Keys. And I'm Nick Casteel. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, you, Nick. Kevin. We appreciate it. And for our YouTube audience watching right now, if you've gotten to this point in the episode, do us both a favor. Hit the like button, please, and thank you. Make sure you also share the content and subscribe to our channel, please. And if you are listening on Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, please do the same. Give us a like, a 5-star rating, and subscribe for our latest content. Nick, I'm going to leave a question for our audience on the way out the chat. Get their brains turning a little bit. So this is for you, audience. Have you ever purchased a home and found a major issue after you closed on the deal? What was it and how did you resolve that problem? Don't tell us now. Leave it in the comments below. Besides that, we'll talk to you next time.